Hi, I'm Biv Wadden, and in this video segment, I'm going to cover the importance of a balanced finish. In my opinion, this is one of the most underappreciated fundamentals in all of golf. I'm often asked by my students, why is the finish so important? The ball has already been hit. Well, when we swing through to a balanced finish, we're sustaining both the upward and the rearward movement of the left shoulder all the way up to the top. And why is this important? Well, most beginning golfers erroneously believe that the club shaft and the leading edge of the club face is magically going to get delivered right back to the impact position to hit a great golf shot. This is not correct. What happens instead is that the butt end of the club is going to get pulled down well underneath its original height and address. And right in here, the butt end of the club is going to be pulled upward. And it's the upward pulling of the butt end of the club that is responsible for squaring up both the club shaft and the leading edge of the club face at impact. And what is it that gets the butt end of the club pulling upward? It's the left shoulder. The left shoulder needs to sustain its movement through to the finish, and there's an upward movement and a rearward movement that the left shoulder goes through when you're swinging into a full finish. Without that, the butt end of the club cannot come up, and the club shaft and the club face will not square. This has very important implications for the teaching sequence in the golf swing. So if the teaching sequence starts at the beginning chronologically of the swing, and we teach the setup, then halfway back, up to the top, halfway down, impact. Maybe we get to the end of the swing, much later. If the finish is so important to squaring the shaft off and the club face, it needs to be taught very early in the teaching sequence to newer golfers who are having trouble squaring up the club and hitting shots off to the right and being very frustrated. Now, for you advanced students, I've got a video clip of a more in-depth analysis of Ben Hogan's swing. Hogan was known for his classic finish. We're going to follow both the movement of his left shoulder and the butt end of the club, and I think you'll see some interesting things. Have a look. Here's a slow motion video, face on, of Ben Hogan, and I'm going to trace 2 points of motion. The first is the butt end of the grip, and the second will be the movement of the left shoulder. Both of these points will be traced throughout the entire swing, where the line trace in green shows movement during the backswing, while the blue trace shows movement during the downswing. A line which connects the left shoulder to the butt end of the grip is shown in green at address, and that same relationship is shown in blue at impact. Here is what I'm anxious to show you, and that is, as the hands come downward into impact, the butt end of the grip moves downward along this blue trace, and you're going to see the butt end of the grip move well below the original level or height at which that grip stood at address. Okay. Now, just prior to impact, the grip is nearly 3 inches underneath its original address position. The shaft is still way back here, 90 degrees relative to the kind of vertical address position. And at this point, you should be wondering, how in the world is a club shaft going to square off from here? And the shaft and the club face will be able to square off because the butt end of the club, okay, at just the last millisecond, the butt end of the club is going to be sharply pulled upward through impact. And the fulcrum of the club movement prior to impact, okay, is not at the butt end of the club. It's actually a few inches below the right hand, near to where the grip meets the shaft. And the club shaft and the club face square themselves through both the upward pulling of the grip through impact and the leveraging of this grip near the fulcrum point. Now at impact, notice how the butt end of the club has almost climbed back to its original height at address. It's also moved leftward ahead of its original address position by a good 8 to 10 inches, and this leftward movement gives the rotating shaft just a little bit extra time to square up, as well as de-lofting the club face at impact. And notice how also how the club head strikes the ball while the butt end of the club is directly underneath the left shoulder. Now let's go back to the downswing and take a closer look at the movement of the left shoulder. And here's a surprise. The left shoulder moves upward very early in the downswing. And it's an axiom that two opposite ends of any rotating motion must move opposite one another. So as the body rotates into the downswing, the hands are moving opposite the left shoulder. And the left shoulder first moves laterally right along this blue trace here. But then as the hands reach kind of this late downswing point, the shoulder begins to move upward fairly sharply. And this turbocharges the movement of the hands, into impact. Now the butt end of the club is going to reach a low point here. It's going to reach a minimum, and after that the grip begins to move upward. Now, the rising left shoulder not only pulls the grip upward, but once impact's been reached, the left shoulder is now moving away from the target. This movement of the left shoulder away from the target causes the butt end of the club to move upward at about a 45-degree angle. Here you can see, here we got about 45 degrees. Okay. So is this upward pulling of the butt end of the grip something we actually have to think about in our swing? And the answer to this is no. The upward movement of the grip will take care of itself automatically by making sure you sustain your shoulder rotation all the way into the finish. And the key to sustaining your shoulder rotation is to develop a well-architected and balanced finish the same way you see Ben Hogan finishing here. Now, while I'm here, I want to point out two other things. First, notice at impact, Hogan's grip, his hands are centered within his pelvis, and this is the same position that his hands occupied at address. Right centered within that pelvis. You'll see those hands are still centered within the pelvis at impact, and you don't need to do anything special with your hands to get them further left of your body at impact, or further left of this original point at address. Okay, the turning and leftward shift of the hips will take care of this. Okay. Second, I want you to notice how Hogan releases his eyesight after impact, and he's going to pick up the ball in flight almost immediately after impact. All good ball strikers release their heads immediately after impact. This helps sustain the rotation of their shoulders into the finish. Now, keeping the head down after impact is only going to interfere with the proper rotation of the left shoulder. Keeping your head down might be good advice in the backswing, but it is terrible advice on the follow-through. Thank you for watching. Please see my video on the 5 key alignment features of a perfectly balanced finish.